On this episode of The Conversation, we examine the government and opposition's competing visions for Jamaica's fiscal future, as well as U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio's recent visit to the island. We'll do that and more with President of Jamaica's National Democratic Movement, Attorney at Law Peter Townsend. I'm Kwame Thomas. More after the break. Welcome to The Conversation. How are you?
I'm great. Thank you, Kwame, and thanks to your viewers.
Yes, so this is your opportunity to tell them that again. We have been looking at a lot of things, the budget readings especially, and we are seeing a bit of what you might call competing visions, you know, in terms of how we get there, how do we secure Jamaica's fiscal future. So from your perspective, how effectively do you think Minister Favour Williams presented the government's fiscal strategy for the 2025-26 year?
Well, Kwame, I have seen a lot of budget debates over the years. At this point in time of my life, I've seen a whole lot. And I'm coming from an era in which, when it comes around to budget time, people were living in fear, because usually you would get a lot of announcement about
Taxes.
new taxes, taxes upon taxes, budget after budget. It was all about raising more taxes.
Taxes and wage freeze and
yes,
cuts. Okay.
Cuts and wage freeze. Since independence, for the most part, Jamaica has been really mismanaged by, our economic affairs have been mismanaged by successive governments or administrations in both PNP and the GLP. And it has led to devaluation, high inflation, loss in revenue through corruption, recklessness. And so the budget was never a pleasant exercise for the Jamaican people. And so for the first, in a long time, I must give credit where it is due, that we have reached a point in time where there is, for the first time, some amount of fiscal responsibility in our budget. We started in about 2007, and what plagued us for many years is that there was never continuity. So what one political party started, the other used to discontinue, and there were a lot of trial and error that was taking place. There was never a coherent and organized, deliberate plan or platform laid down upon which successive governments would build upon.
But when you say it has been haphazard, so to
It's been
speak,
pretty haphazard, yeah.
you know. But remember that one party, the People's National Party, was in power for roughly 18 years.
Right.
So was that haphazard? Because you would have had the opportunity of hearing, you know, upwards of at least 15 budget presentations there.
Right, so that was the budget presentation during the PNP's tenure. But when I speak about continuity, I'm talking about when a government changed, when an administration changed to another political party, that you'd have had some amount of continuity where good policies were concerned. If there was any, perhaps there was not much, because this country has been, for the most part, run into the ground. The PNP was in power for 18.5 years.
Yeah.
But during that part, the country had little or no growth. We had mass devaluation and a lot of economic problems. Our debt-to-GDP ratio ballooned out of control. And in 2007, when there was a change in government for the first time, well, at least just prior to that, the Omar Davis, the PJ Patterson, Omar Davis administration, with PJ being the Prime Minister and Omar being the Minister of Finance, had gotten rid of the IMF because the IMF restriction was a little bit too harsh, too restrictive in terms of them being able to spend the money to gain political advantage. Because it is not easy to walk that tightrope when it comes to battling the economic challenges, but at the same time to show some amount of fiscal responsibility in balancing the budget and not running with it. And so it was a challenge for Mr. Patterson and Omar Davies. They got rid of the IMF, and then they started to borrow money from more expensive sources. So it's like you're getting rid of the traditional commercial banks and go to some loan shark to borrow, because they're not as stringent in terms of their restriction in terms of how you're going to spend that money. And so they wanted to do what it is referred to often to as a run with it, where one administration, this infamous speech by the then finance minister, who said that, look, we had to run with it so that the party could attempt to win elections, because it is never easy to implement policies that are going to
that
bring
can
a certain result.
potentially
Yes,
derail your political
yes,
aspirations.
because pleasing the people with goodies and bringing your debt down are not necessarily in harmony with each other. And so we're in a situation where a debt-to-GDP ratio of 170%. What that means that for every dollar that you earn, you're spending, for every dollar, $1.70.
An additional 70 cents.
An additional 70 cents over what you have earned. And so what we kept doing was borrowing more to pay our bills, borrowing to pay our bills, and so the debt-to-GDP ratio kept increasing. And so the new administration in 2007 brought about the IMF, which started to put us back into that straitjacket in terms of for us to get back on the path of fiscal responsibility. They had their own challenges in adhering to it, and they started to fail the IMF test. That is the Golding-Shaw administration, in terms of Golding as Prime Minister and Shaw as Finance Minister. And then when Andrew Holness took over the administration from Bruce Golding, just before the 2011 general elections, he promised bitter medicine. That bitter medicine was a warning to the people that they're going to have to implement strong fiscal policies, austerity measures to get us back on track. And it didn't go down well. He lost the elections. And the good thing that happened is that when Portia Simpson succeeded and appointed Peter Phillips as finance minister, she had a lot of political capital, which she used to dispense a bitter medicine. What better person to dispense medicine to a child than Mama? Mama P. Mama who loves you. And Mama said, come to me, child, and take your medicine. It's bitter, but you'll take it. And for that tenure between 2011 and 2016, under Portia Simpson and Peter Phillips, they stuck with what Bruce Golding and Hadley Shaw started, but was not doing a good job of. And they set it with the setting up of EPOC, which is an economic body that had oversight. The
oversight committee. Right,
chaired by Richard Biles and co-chaired by the governor of the central bank at the time, Mr. Winter. And together, Jamaican people made some sacrifices to walk that fiscal tightrope. And then when the Andrew Holness Hadley Shaw came in 2016, and then subsequently Nigel Clark came into the picture, that continuity continued. And we are in a situation today where our debt-to-GDP ratio has come down from 170% to 69%. It means that, or 68 point something. It means that for the first in a long while, we actually have almost 30 cents out of every dollar that we can actually pay bills without having to borrow. And so coming into, I say all of this to say that now to come into an election year, election years are usually very tempting for politicians to
offer goodies.
And goodies don't come free. There's a price for goodies. And so this is where the state was now set for this budget battle, where the governing party now had to choose between staying on the path of fiscal responsibility that we have gotten so we are now becoming famous for. The world is watching. The World Bank and the IMF has had praises for Jamaica. Jamaica is now seen as a poster child for their program. Our former finance minister is now a vice president of the IMF. So a lot of big things are expected of us moving forward to continue the economic reforms and to get the kind of traction with the whole fiscal responsibility and to at the same time to build the economy and to grow the economy. And so what does the government do? Do they run with it to get goodies to win the election, or do they still keep their finger on the path of fiscal responsibility, while at the same time battling the economic challenges and letting the people at the micro level feel some of this macroeconomic success that we have been boasting about, which other people are saying is not not trickling down to the average man. And then the opposition coming to the mix now wants power. And so the opposition now has to come to present, to make a presentation, to capture imagination of the people, to show that they can do a better job of managing the country's affairs. And so it is a high wire act that both of them would have had to do to score points to go into what is an inevitable election, because it is due constitutionally by later September this year.
So how would you grade them, though? I mean, looking at the government's presentation, you, based on what you've been saying, you're indicating somehow that they're a lot more conservative than expected. So they're seemingly more mature fiscally, that is, so they have not offered too many goodies. And separate from that fact now, they're looking at certain programs that you'll have to continue, some you'll have to implement, and they have not announced any new taxes, which would have been unprecedented again. Because if they win, this would be 1, 2, 3 terms.
Right.
No taxes, no new taxes.
No, I'm in a little predicament because, you know, I support term limits. And I don't believe in giving any one prime minister more than 2 terms. Unfortunately, it's not the current law that we have. However, I must say that the situation that we find ourselves in as a country, where for the first time in 8 consecutive years we have not had any new tax increases, and we have had
growth,
the most sustained economic stability. We have brought the debt to GDP down. I must say, although I've been one of the biggest critics of this administration, I'd be hypocritical if I don't give them credit where it's due.
So
right? That they have,
out of 10, how much would you give them?
Well, the finance minister, interestingly, it's the first female finance minister we have ever had in our history. I believe she acquitted herself quite well. I think she made a good delivery in terms of form and substance. I also believe the opposition spokesman, Julian Robinson,
did well.
As usual, he made a good presentation. The Prime Minister also did. It was a very marathon. It was very, very long, but I guess he had a lot to say as the Prime Minister, and it's been an election year. He had to make his case. The opposition leader didn't do too badly. However, what has now turned out, it has now turned out that what he has presented was not really a budget for the
Don't tell me about
for the financial.
Don't tell me about
year.
him yet. Don't tell me about the opposition leader yet. I want to hear your assessment of the government's budget. You know, first you'd want to tell me on a scale of 1 to 10, how well did they do? And separate from that, just before we ease into the break, some of the impacts of what some of the things that they have spoken about. What are your assessment of those?
All right. Well, when I believe that first of all, that the budget which was presented, because a budget for a country, budgeting is similar to what you do in running a home or running a business. Just that a budget for a country is a much, much grander scale.
Yeah.
Right? And it's not an easy job to do. I believe that I saw a lot of maturity in the administration, especially to do a budget in an election year in which you have to keep the fiscal discipline in place. And at the same time, you have to do that balancing act to get some of the benefits to reach the people. I believe that the maturity that I saw in that aspect, I give them some credit for. And although I'm not so much into grading, I would give them definitely a passing mark for the budget.
So a passing mark meaning what? 60, 70, 80?
Well, yes, I would give them at least a 70%.
Yeah. All right. So when we come back, though, one of the things that I want to find out, because we have heard about the Spark program, we have heard about the SHIP program, as in the Southern Coastal Highway project. We want to find out what are some of the impacts that we should expect from those projects in terms of economic growth and job creation, because that's something for us to consider. But we'll go to that, we'll come back to that immediately after the break. Just want to remind you that you are watching The Conversation, and I'm here with the president of the National Democratic Movement, Attorney at Law Peter Townsend. We'll be right back after these messages. Welcome back to The Conversation. Just before we went to the break, we wanted to find out now, because the primary question is, how will projects like the SHIP program, that's the Southern Coastal Highway Improvement Program, and the Spark program, how will those help to influence economic growth and job creation? And here's my background for that. Since about 2011, we have not seen where the government has successfully been able to spend everything from the cap budget. This last fiscal year, they would have underspent by about 10 billion, somewhere around that figure. And we're looking at an increase in this year's budget, or this coming year's budget. Do you think this is a good posture for them to have? Because we know that if you are currently or consistently underspending, how will that influence job creation and economic growth, seeing that the government is the largest pusher, so to speak, of those things?
All right. First of all, from my cursory glance of the budget, the total expenditure for this year is 1.26 trillion that is budgeted for the 2025-2026 financial year, which is a decrease of 9.1% from the previous year's budget, which is a reduction of a few billion dollars reduction, 10% reduction. Now, we're talking about a total capital expenditure budget budgeted for of $62.59 billion. It seems as if a lot of the projects that have been approved over the years, successive years, end up not being implemented because of the whole, for the most part, the whole government procurement process. Because of the mass corruption which this country has faced for so many decades, we have had to put in very stringent regulations and rules to do with procurement, which, although the purpose of it is to minimize waste and corruption, it has also been counterproductive in that it has significantly curtailed and delayed actual implementation and the spending of those monies to really do what was set out to do.
So
now,
is it that you're saying then the trade-off that we have had to make? So because of corruption, the level of corruption that we have had to implement systems of inefficiencies to ensure that we're able to survive?
Yes, and it's a sad indictment as a people that we have been historically and culturally just so corrupt as a nation, right, in our political affairs and the management of our country, that we have to put these stringent regulations in place that is so counterproductive that it is inhibiting our development. So it's a chicken and egg situation. How do you fix it without, because you can't take them away. You can't take those restrictions away because we have shown that the propensity to really be corrupt and for those monies to disappear.
So couldn't we implement other measures that are sustainable, where that they're not inhibitive to growth, but yet still they're a deterrent to the level of corruption that we have?
Which is the balancing act that the people who have been vying for the job to run the country, they have to find a formula that is going to work best for us, that is going to deliver the goodies, to deliver the projects, but at the same time, cut the waste and cut the corruption. They just have to find a way. It's unfortunate that the lawmakers are, in many cases, the lawbreakers. The people who are setting up the rules to kill corruption. It's unfortunate that it is being perceived, at least, that they contribute towards the corruption that we are trying to prevent. And so, as you were saying about the projects such as the
Southern Spark program,
the Spark program, the Montego Bay Perimeter Road and the the Southern Coast Highway improvement. Yes, you're right. In every country, government expenditure and government-funded projects contribute significantly towards the economic development of the country. And those projects will definitely, apart from employing a lot of people on the ground, they also create a lot of economic activity because the material that has to be supplied for these projects create jobs in factories and distribution outlets, the employment of skilled and unskilled workers involved, the grocery shops in the communities, the barber shops, the utility company. It has a multiplying effect. It has a positive ripple effect on the economic activities of the country. And so getting those implemented actually benefits the economy. And so when those are curtailed from happening, it also
creates a hindrance
to economic activity and economic development.
So do you think that there's any way? No. Do you think that they will be able to actually implement and execute these projects over this coming year?
Well, it is my wish that they will, and I believe that one of the things that is going to force it to happen is that this is exam year for the government.
Mm-hmm.
They have to implement, they have to deliver, because they have been boasting about the economic success of Jamaica on the macro level, and the people are saying, we really want to feel some of that. And so I believe
this is going to be their opportunity.
I believe that the government is going to seize the opportunity to actually implement as much of these projects as possible so that the people can start to feel the benefit and that the economy can benefit from it so that they can have a good report to the voters of this country so that they can decide if they want to give them another term in office.
So you had stated earlier in our conversation that you don't think that the opposition presented a real budget, so to speak. And so what I want to get from you now is an understanding or a critique of, especially of the recurrent expenditure. I want to find out, how do you assess opposition leader Golding's critique of funding recurrent expenditures by selling future income?
All right, so politicians in opposition will always have a lot to say, but when you're in office, it's another matter. Now, when I heard the finance spokesperson on finance, spokesperson finance presentation, Julian, and the opposition leaders' presentation, they all sounded good and grandiose, their ideas and policies and programs. But at that time, because it's a budget debate, which should have to do with the year under review and the year that you are now looking at presenting the budget for, judging it in the context of what a budget is supposed to be, it sounded good, but there were no figures, there were no numbers that would show us that it was realistic for them to do what they were promising in the budget. Then it turned out that it was subsequently revealed that it was impractical for the current year and that it was really a vision for their first 5 years in office.
So hold up, you are saying that the opposition's budget presentation, it was a bite that lacked teeth?
Well, apart from being a bite that lacked teeth, it really was a non-budget. It was a budget for a 5-year span and not for a 1-year period, which you're now not comparing apples with apples. So whatever the finance minister presented or the opposition presented, you are not comparing apples with apples. So it makes it a little difficult because this is the first time I recall seeing a situation like this, because usually the opposition's budget is a critique of the government administration's budget, and alternative proposal to it to say how they would have managed the affairs of that for the amount of money that we have on the table to spend and the potential revenue that we'll bring in. And so to give us a 5-year dream and without putting numbers to it, it makes it very hard to really rate or compare the opposition's presentation with the governing parties.
So you're saying that even the presentation that spoke about increased spending in education, in health, and in infrastructure development, the fact that no figures have been presented, no concrete figures have been presented, it renders the whole budget presentation unfeasible?
Well, without numbers, because it may not be unfeasible enough, but if you haven't presented the numbers, how are we going to judge it as to whether it's feasible or not?
There's no capacity for you to make a valid judgment.
Exactly,
then.
because what you have presented us is your wish list. This is your wish list, but you have not told us how you're going to fund this wish list. And that is important, because are we going to go back to where we're going to be spending more money than we are earning to fulfill your wish list? So we definitely need to know. And so that is a situation that the opposition has found itself in.
So the opposition technically has been strong on making certain claims as far as social spending is concerned. Now, one of the things that I wanted to find out, before I even get to that, is the impact of NHD fund withdrawal. That's one of the issues. And then my question now, would you say the impact of ending the National Housing Trust fund withdrawal on housing and fiscal policy, if you think that's feasible now, if you think that's something that we should aspire to, or the government should aspire to?
It's very unfortunate that administration after administration, starting with previous PNP administration, raid the coffers of the NHD to fund the national budget. The NHD was set up for a different purpose. The NHD, National Housing Trust, is, as the name suggests, a trust, which was set up for the Jamaican workers who contribute to that trust, for those funds to be held in trust to improve the housing stock for the beneficiaries who are the contributors to the National Housing Trust. And so to dip into the National Housing Trust and not to borrow from it to pay back, but to use it for other expenses, it is an unfortunate thing. And the first time it happened under PNP government, the then opposition JLP criticized it and said that no way, that is not good, and promised when they take office, they wouldn't.
And they're now backpedaling.
And then they took office and they continued the same thing. Why am I to believe that a future PNP government is going to stop that? And if they are promising to stop it, what is going to replace the funding for it? So you need to tell us how you're going to replace that chunk of fund which you are now going to stop taking from the NHD coffers.
All right, so a lot more to consider as far as that one is concerned, because we're not fully finished with that particular point. But just want to remind you that you're watching the conversation. I'm speaking with the president of the National Democratic Movement, Peter Townsend. We'll be right back after these messages. Welcome back to the conversation. Just before we went to the break, one of the questions that I wanted to ask, it's pretty much a follow-up to NHD. You stated that the monies from the NHD is held in trust, all right, and we are not taking from its coffers with the intent to repay, but we're just using that.
Is it being treated as like a tax?
Yes. So I had the privilege of attending up by one of the local universities, the Department of Economics budget forum, and that would have been Thursday last. And one of the statements that was made or put forward by an academic is, why not stop? So instead of continue to withdraw from the fund, or instead of, the fund shouldn't take from us now, because they have a lot of money in trust. Don't take any more money from the government, or from the public rather, until that time comes when the fund is at a place where you're now able to withdraw from or pull from the government, or from people, I should say. In a sense, what he was saying is that we shouldn't take any more from it, and that's the government, and we shouldn't contribute anything else to the fund until a clear decision has been made as to how we're going to proceed, or until we return it to its original mandate. What are your views on that?
All right. I do agree that we need to return the trust to its original mandate, right? Which I think they're trying their best to stick to that mandate. But to suddenly stop contributors from contributing to the trust, I am in total disagreement with that, because
Why?
you're now disrupting the trust. Remember, the contributors who make contribution to the trust, what are you going to say? People continue to get NHC benefits, whether it be their contribution refund and mortgage loans. Are you saying that people should also stop those activities? So you can't. I don't agree with the approach of stopping contribution.
Yeah.
The new contribution going to the fund. You're also going to have a problem if the government suddenly stop taking the money. I agree that they should cease and desist. However, until you have a replacement, are we going to throw the baby out of the bathwater?
Yeah.
Are we going to cut off one nose to spite our faces? What will be the end result? So we are going to have to strategically manage this situation to fuse in the fallout, the potential fallout in terms of revenue to replace the money that you are currently taking from the NHT. But I believe that it's an untenable situation that should not continue indefinitely. We have to find a way
to phase this out.
To phase this out and to find more meaningful ways for the housing trust to improve the housing situation in this country, because the housing situation is not a pretty one.
So we shift gears now, and we just had the U.S. Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, visiting Jamaica, and a lot of reactions have come about from that particular visit. Concerns about sovereignty, to hopes of enhanced tourism, and so on. So we want to get your understanding of what that meant. So as NDM president, how do you assess his visit to Jamaica and the impact of its impact on Jamaica's sovereignty and our global standing?
Well, on the lead up to Marco Rubio's visit to Jamaica, based on the posturing of the Trump administration globally since coming to office, how many months ago?
January.
In January.
Yeah.
They seem to have been using a big stick approach as they approach other nations. And so we were braced for this sort of attitude when he came here. Particularly it had to do with the employment of Cuban health workers in the Caribbean and in Jamaica in particular.
Yeah.
We heard the posturing of the Trump administration that, and mixed with things like threats to sanctions and to remove and to withdraw visas from leaders of countries that continue to facilitate the Cuban employing Cuban health workers because they saw it as exploitation, etc. But I was pleasantly surprised. I'm not sure what happened behind the scene in terms of the meeting behind closed door with the Prime Minister and the Secretary of State and their teams, respective teams. But if I'm to take what came out of the press conference and what both parties, what the Prime Minister and Mr. Rubio have said, it sounds like they had a very amicable and decent meeting, and Jamaica's position seemed to have been respected in terms of the fact that the Cuban medical workers, doctors and nurses that are here are not being exploited. They are being treated like
fairly, according to our laws.
To our labor laws, and that we were not remitting money to them through the Cuban government, as the Americans were alleging, and that their passports were seized and had in Cuba as a part of that whole exploitation ring. And the Secretary of State was quite respectful in his utterances about Jamaica and the relationship between the two countries. And so I believe that the outcome seemed to have been one that is favorable to Jamaica's image and standing in the Caribbean and globally. And so I really don't have much criticism of that visit and what seems to be the outcome of it.
All right, so continuing now on that, seeing as though you brought it up, we're looking at Jamaica's position as far as the US-Cuba relations are concerned, the tensions between both countries. My question is, where do you think we stand, on that particular issue, and how can we balance our relations with both nations, as in with the US and Cuba, because we are Cuba is our brother.
Yes.
And the U.S. is there. Now, we share more with Cuba, it would appear, based on proximity and
Right.
certain cultural
Right.
norms,
Right.
than with the U.S.
Right.
How do you think we should balance that particular relationship?
So the U.S. is our largest trading partner.
Definitely.
Right? And Cuba is our nearest neighbor. And the truth of the matter is that Cuba has helped this country a whole lot.
Yeah.
In terms of not just their medical team, they have built schools, they have built micro dams, they have built health centers. We have had a good relationship with Cuba. We may not see eye to eye. You'll never see eye to eye
With any country.
100% with any country, your neighbors, your friends, even your own relatives.
Yeah.
And so even though Jamaica may not see eye to eye with a lot of things that happens in Cuba in terms of the system of government, they are our neighbors and our friends. And I believe that we have to balance the relationship with Cuba along with our trading partner. And I don't believe we should ever consider throwing our neighbors under the bus. The U.S. has to be respectful of us trading with Cuba, just the way the U.S. trades with China, which has a similar system of government to Cuba, and the U.S. also trades with Russia. So you can't want to impose upon us as a Caribbean nation any big stick approach that
Do as I say, but not as I do.
Do as I say, but not as I do. And for us not to be respectful and to have a good relationship with our brother and sister nation. So I am very pleased that successive administrations in Jamaica have been able to manage our relationship with Cuba, like any other Caribbean island, so that we maintain that harmony, because we have mutually benefited from a relationship in terms of Jamaica-Cuban relationship, in the same way we benefit from our relationship with the U.S. And so we are not at war with any country, Jamaica. We have to live good with everybody. And so we have to live good with our neighbor, Cuba, and we have to live good with our big trading partner,
US.
United States.
So tell us now about the impact on our tourism sector. We have seemingly, well, all things are pointing in the direction of a reevaluation of the travel advisory that has been issued by the United States. And so how significant is that reassessment, for Jamaica's economy, and what steps do you think that we should take in light of that to boost our tourism sector?
You see, we're our own biggest enemy where crime is concerned, right? And so I can't blame the US or any country that issue travel advisory to say to their citizens that it is unsafe to go to Jamaica.
So do you think that their implementation of that particular advisory, it's justified?
You mean for the US to have a travel advisory against Jamaica?
To the extent that it does. To the extent that it does, yeah.
Well, look, if you are a responsible government and you are mandated to take care of your citizens, then if you see danger or potential danger, I have no problem in you warning them. It is for us to get our act together to bring our crime under control to the point where not just visitors be safe, our own people in Jamaica must be safe. Because when we hear these travel advisory, right, can we deny that there is truth to it? The fact of the matter is that our murder per 100,000 is way, way above the world average. Yeah. We are one of the most murderous countries in the entire world. That's a fact. And so I have no problem. I know it affects us, but I can't quarrel with any country that issue a travel advisory about the safety of coming to Jamaica. I'm pleased to see that we have had a reduction in the murder rate, and I hope that we can continue to build on that and to further reduce and to eliminate as much as possible, to bring our murder levels down to the level of world standard. We are way above the Caribbean. We are way above this hemisphere. We are way above the rest of the world.
So the Prime Minister had made a statement about enclave tourism, because we understand that the violence, the crime and the violence is restricted to particular pockets in the country. Do you think it's sufficient for him to state that, or he definitely needs to do significantly more to carry down that crime issue, so that we don't have to be in a position where we need to hear or see an advisory?
Right, because to me, it is not good enough just to create this security and safety in the areas that tourists are going to traverse, while in these so-called enclaves and pockets, the crime is rampant. we must look out for our own citizens and the safety of our own citizens, whether they live in the garrisons or in the suburbs. Our people's safety and security must be paramount. And so I believe it's not just about tourism. Tourism must just be a byproduct of having a stable, safe country in which people can live and prosper and feel happy. We have to build out Jamaica in terms of our national security so that our people feel truly and genuinely safe, and the tourists will come. We can't be hypocritical to just sandpaper it, to wallpaper it and believe that that is good enough. No, we must fix Jamaica's crime problem to make our people safe, and the tourists will come.
All right. So thank you. We are going to go for a final break now, and when we return, we will look at some of your own political aspirations. Just want to remind you, you're watching The Conversation. I'm Kwame Thomas. We'll be right back after these messages. Welcome back to The Conversation. Just before we went to the break, we were looking at enclave tourism, we looked at the issue of crime and the fact that you don't want the government to wallpaper it in, as you stated earlier. But now we want to look a little further at the future of Jamaica, of the U.S.-Jamaica relations. You know, what are some of those areas that you think Jamaica should prioritize to strengthen its ties with the U.S. in terms of trade, security, culture, whatever else it may be?
Well, based on the path that the new administration that is governing the U.S. is on, they seem to be taking an isolationist approach, and there's likely to be fallouts from the relationship between themselves and their
global trading partners.
Right, such as the Canadians, the Mexicans, the Europeans, and so on and so forth, China. We have to see what is it that we produce that we can seize the opportunity to exploit that opening. What can we produce in a large enough scale that we can supply that market with? Because there's no threat of tariffs against our imports.
Yeah.
So it means that if tariffs are ever applied to the goods coming in from their traditional trading partners, the large one that is, those goods and services are going to be more expensive in America.
Yeah.
There'll be no tariffs against ours. So herein lies the opportunity. But are we a mass producer? What do we produce in a large scale here?
Culture.
Well, culture, right, is one of the areas. So we have to just look at what is it that we bring to the table? What are our strengths? And we need to play up those strengths. We need to capitalize on those strengths so that we can not waste this crisis, because in every crisis, in every situation, there's an opportunity. We can't sit idly by and let this crisis unfold and we just watch as spectators. We need to find a way that we can take the opening and to exploit it in a positive way for Jamaica. So
tell me about you and your party's own political aspirations now. If the National Democratic Movement was to gain power now, as far as foreign policy is concerned, what are some of those changes that you would advocate for in Jamaica's foreign policy towards the U.S. following Marco Rubio's visit?
Well, Jamaica's foreign policies, for the most part, has been consistent, except for the 70s when, in the height of the Cold War, when Jamaica's alignment seemed to have been against the West and more with the communist bloc or the socialist bloc.
Was that the case though? Was it, our stance was a little more socialist, but it doesn't mean that we weren't aligned with the rest of the West. It's just that we had our own opinions, right?
Right, but we must admit that in the height of the Cold War, some aspect of it was being played out here in Jamaica, where the US and Cuba was concerned. The fact that the government of the 70s was so closely aligned to Cuba, it is said that the US played a very, very serious role in breaking up that dolly house, so to speak, between Jamaica and Cuba. And the US was more aligned to the then opposition JLP, which eventually won that 1980 election. And then when Michael Manley, Michael Manley opposition sort of reinvented himself, went back to the US, mend fences, and then he took office in 1989, was returned to office in 1989, and since then, Jamaica has been much, much more, you know, we got back to the path where we have been traditionally since pre-independence and since independence, where we have been aligned with the West for the most part. So although we do, as I said, we are not at war with any country. As a Jamaica, we have a good relationship with Russia, the United States, the UK, the EU,
very
Haiti,
neutral, very neutral.
Cuba. We have pursued a very neutral foreign policy, and we don't see the need to change that really. So we don't believe in reinventing the wheel.
So, all right, and I'm happy that you said that. Tell me now about the vision for sovereignty and development. How does the National Democratic Movement plan to balance international partnerships, you know, with safeguarding Jamaica's own sovereignty and development? Because we're looking to develop now, but how would you safeguard that?
I believe that although crime and other economic issues are our main problem, I believe governance is one of our biggest problems. We spoke earlier on about the fact that we have had to put in a lot of stringent things to kill corruption, and those things have inhibited us, right? We get a complaint coming out of the Integrity Commission, but it was set up for a purpose to help to curtail corruption. It has caused a backlash. And if we had better governance, there would be no need to have so many oversight bodies and so many restrictions which are now affecting growth and development of this country and implementation of policies and of awarding contracts. But we have adopted the Westminster model for to manage our political affairs, and we have bastardized it. We have not done a good job of it, and it has fueled the corruption and the lack of the poor governance that we are facing. The NDM, from day one, our main platform has been about to reform our constitution, to first of all, move Jamaica from the monarchy. Mm-hmm. But not just to move Jamaica from the monarchy, but to create a republic with a system that is more practical than the Westminster model, to curtail corruption and to foster good governance. What do I mean by that? We need to have a system in which the people, first of all, directly elect the head of state. We need to have a system in which there's transparency and accountability. For you to have accountability and transparency. What kind of
head of state, though?
An executive head of state.
Okay.
A ceremonial head of state. Just to remove the monarchy as head of our country, and to rechristen the Governor General into becoming a ceremonial president that is still unelected by the people, but is still an appointed person that is ratified by all in parliamentarian and not the people, to me, really flies in the face of respect for the people of this country.
Okay.
And so what we are saying is that the people should directly elect an executive head of state who should manage Jamaica's affairs with a cabinet, which is the executive, which should not be a part of the legislature or the parliament. Because if we have the people who are supposed to be the watchdogs, who are the lawmakers and the parliamentarians, being a part of the executive arm, which is managing the affairs, who is the country's watchdog? Who is going to keep them, keep the spotlight on the transparency so that we get better value for our money? So if we had a system in which MPs could not be ministers unless they resign from it, mm-hmm. and so we have three defined arms of government: an executive, directly elected by the people in terms of the prime minister, and you appoint the best minds to form the cabinet, and none of those persons should be a part of the legislature.
Yeah.
And the legislature could then perform its true role of being the people's watchdog to see that there's transparency and accountability. Then you would need all these other oversight bodies that are now restricting and the award of contracts and implementation of projects taking forever and actually slowing us down and setting us back.
So long and short, then you're saying that this quote-unquote bastardized version of the Westminster system, we have abused it to the extent that it no longer serves us.
It is not working as Westminster is working in England and other countries, and Canada and other countries. It is now holding us back. And what is frustrating is that the government claim that they're having a constitutional reform process going on. But from what we have seen, from the looks of it,
there hasn't been enough consultations.
First of all, there's not enough consultation. Yeah. And it's clear that what themselves and the opposition have agreed on, is really more of the same, because all they are doing is making cosmetic changes. And they intend to have a prime minister that is not elected by the people directly, and a head of state that is not elected by the people directly, and a Senate that is not elected by the people at all. And so I believe therein lies one of our challenges. I believe that is a part of the thing that is holding us back. But because it's not seen as a bread and butter issue, people can, in many cases, are not making the connection between that and where we are, and what is holding us back from implementing projects to create a more prosperous economy.
So you have previously mentioned that the NDM might not participate in the upcoming elections. You know, I want to find out whether or not this stance has changed, or will the NDM be fielding candidates for the upcoming election, should it be called?
You see, to field candidates in an election, I don't believe in fielding candidates just for fielding candidates' sake. I believe that you have to field candidates that if you feel you have a realistic chance of success, and you have to, not just that, but you have to also be on the ground, you have to be doing the political work that you can expect certain results. The truth of the matter is that we live in a two-party democracy for the most part, where the people have a mindset of either the People's National Party or the Jamaica Labour Party. And it's not easy to break that cycle. The kind of resources of human and financial it will take for a third political party or another political party outside of the PNP and JLP, it's not easy. I'm not going to come here and pretend that it's easy. So it's not easy, but we came on the scene. We're hoping to get even one seat in Parliament so that we could fight for the constitutional reform that we think Jamaica need.
So is this a battle worth fighting?
We have been unsuccessful at that since our inception. And we were excited and welcomed the constitutional reform committee that was set up to reform the constitution, so that because if we can get the kind of reform we need in Jamaica, and the systems of checks and balances are put in place so that we have better governance and a better country, then they don't need for us to even run for political office, because we'll have that system of checks and balance. So we were hoping that we'll have an opportunity to play a much significant more role in this reform process. But it has turned out that it has just been between the PNP and the JLP and a few so-called independent persons that they have brought to the table. And it looks like this referendum is not even going to take place, because how are we going to have a referendum in the same year we have an election? Are we going to have a referendum between now and when June, and then between June and September we have an election? And I don't think we can have both of them on the same day, because then it would skew the results of that
in either direction,
referendum,
in either one.
because it would not become a partisan affair.
All right, well, unfortunately, we are out of time now, but I want to take this opportunity to thank you for taking the time out to sit and have this discussion with us. So there you had it. There you have had it. You have heard from the leader of the National Democratic Movement, Attorney at Law, Peter Townsend, as far as the Marco Rubio visit is concerned, as well as Jamaica's fiscal future. Now, we want you to continue to assess these issues and much more. So on behalf of the entire Scene TV production team, I'm Kwame Thomas, and you have just watched The Conversation.